the defending champs, the reigning MVP versus baby Jordan. We got the matchup that we all wanted to see. And I think we all kind of felt this way. And then we saw it take place, at least in game one, where it's like, oh, Denver, they might be in some trouble against this Wolves team. You talk just stylistically, the Wolves were built to beat this Nuggets team. It almost reminds me of the Daryl Morey, James Harden, Houston Rockets, how they were designed to beat those Warrior teams, switch everything, shoot a ton of threes. Now we all know they weren't successful ultimately, but it feels a little different with this Wolves team. Now, Mike Malone, they're going to send two at baby Jordan, right? They're going to send two at Ant. And the question is, how aggressive are they going to do it? How successful are they going to be with it? I think the problem is Anthony Edwards looks more than ready for that. He looks ready to take on that challenge, move the ball, and trust his teammates. But maybe the biggest story in that game one, Naz Reid, the reigning sixth man of the year. What did he have? 16 points in that fourth quarter. Now, I was expecting Peyton Watson to get more opportunity as just a bigger, longer defender. But I think Mike Malone was forced to go to the veteran Justin Holiday because they needed more shooting and offense on the floor. That's what this Wolves defense does to you. And then you consider the fact that Jamal Murray may be compromised. They've got some real issues here. I think the Nuggets have to figure out how they're going to score. Is that going to be Jokic just going for 50 balls? Are they going to lean more into Michael Porter Jr.? I thought that Minnesota, at least in the first half, they didn't play that handoff well. They let him come off the handoff too clean. They made some adjustments in that second half. Or do you lean maybe into Reggie Jackson, right? Because they're going to need some sort of offensive punch. It feels like with a compromised Murray, they're missing one more shot maker because Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, who else could they bring in off their bench? They're not shot makers. They can make a shot, and Brown's played well, but this is, again, what this Wolves defense does to you. And not only clearly is Jamal Murray chipped up, right? The calf, he's not moving at his normal pace. Jaden McDaniels is a menace. He's a menace. He's picking him up in the backcourt, double switching screens, fighting over the top of screens, rear view contests. He's going to make things very difficult. So again, I think it kind of seems crazy to say this about this Denver team because of the Jokic Murray pick and roll and Porter Jr. as a third option. But where do they find the offense against this Wolves team? That leads me to my underdog picks for tonight's game. You can use the code Alchemy. It really helps supporting the channel. I'm about 25, 30 signups away from hitting my goal. Would be huge for me and my family. Naz Reid, we know the 16 points was somewhat of an anomaly. We can't expect that type of outburst from him in fourth quarters. However, I like his higher than 9.5 in game two tonight because I'm anticipating Towns and Gobert to probably not get a great whistle in Denver in game two. Cat already makes a ton of boneheaded plays, even though he's been really good. I want to shout out Cat. Let me speak about him in a second. But you imagine one or both of them may get in foul trouble. That would leave more minutes for Naz Reid. You saw the success he's having. And, Aaron Gordon is in a torture chamber trying to help and then recover out to either Towns or Naz Reid, where he has to sell out on the three. They can put it down 1-2 steps. They're at the rim. It's been a nightmare for him trying to cover up that weak side. So I like Naz Reid higher than 9.5. And then I'm going to go Reggie Jackson higher than 4.5 points because, again, where does Denver find some more offense? I thought it would be Peyton Watson, not offensively, but just as a bigger defender athlete to match Minnesota's length. And maybe at some point in the series, Malone will go to more Peyton Watson. But right now, the veteran Reggie Jackson with an ailing Jamal Murray, a ball handler, a pick and roll partner, and a guy that's not afraid to take and make shots. I like Reggie Jackson's higher than 4.5 to go along with Naz Reid's higher than 9.5 underdog fantasy. But back to Cat, because obviously he's been a big part of what they did. He went crazy in that third quarter, right? The game was kind of lingering there, and it was a 1-2 punch of Cat and then Conley in that third quarter that aided Ant in his eventual takeover, right? He can't do it all himself, despite how spectacular he is. But I was thinking about, I had brought up a week or two ago how Ant has embraced Rudy Gobert, and that was key to the chemistry of this team, because if Ant does it, everyone else has to do it. And they've accepted him for who he is, and he's proving that some of that stuff was a Utah problem, right? You saw Gobert get caught out on Gordon and Porter Jr. several times on the perimeter and more than held his own. I think that's problematic if you're Denver. When you get that switch, you've got to be able to capitalize on it, and maybe they've got to adjust, but he held his own. But I wanted to shout out Cat because, look, Ant is the undeniable leader and franchise player, right? He snatched that. There was no choice but to kind of yield to Anthony Edwards and his talent if you're Karl Anthony Towns, right? But he's handled it well, right? We know a lot of star players in his scenario, in this situation around the league and over the years that would have been a little bit salty about Ant just snatching the keys from their organization, their franchise. And Cat has been a good soldier. He's a willing number 2, number 3 option. He's trying to do what they ask of him. And so I think that deserves some credit. Whether he had a choice or not, he's doing it with the right type of attitude. Now, can he stay on the floor? He can't help himself. He takes angles as if he's like a small, quick guy sometimes. And you're like, Cat, you're not like, you're going to get the foul. So, I think that we're in store for possibly the best series of this playoffs. You can't write off the champs. Mike Malone, one of the better guys to make adjustments in the league. I just don't know how many adjustments they have, right? And if Jamal Murray is compromised, where does the offense come? You got to trade offense for defense off your bench. And this Wolves team, again, the coaching, the chemistry, the defense, the size, the depth, all the ingredients. But I do expect them to get the ball out of Anthony Edwards' hands tonight and make him, a passer. Just get out of his hands and make the other guys beat them. Who's going to be the short roll? Is that Rudy? Is that Reed? Is that Cat? You may want to look at the hires on the assists from the big men, because it's probably going to be a lot of hockey assists if they trap him that way. I expect them to give him the Steph Curry coverage where it's just at midcourt. I think to try to send help late it is going to be tough with his athleticism and his patience, even at 22 years old. But yeah, I'm just excited to see this play out. I think it's always. I think a lot of us always tend to root for the underdog because it's more exciting, and so that's where I find myself with it. Is I don't have any ill will towards the Nuggets and Jokic and his reign, but it's more exciting to see the Wolves, make this happen. But we're a long ways away from that, and you expect the champs to bounce back tonight in Game 2. I did cover that Game 1 of that series. It's on my Patreon now. Link will be in the description. Let's jump around to some of these other series now that we're all the way into the second round after the Game 7 yesterday. When was it? Was it Friday or Saturday when the Clippers got eliminated once again? How much is Passive P going to get on the open market? He seems like he is just content being a third option. I don't understand his mindset, but the Clippers find themselves right back where they were, right? And I know, I think I had said this last week where, there's a lot of Warrior fans that are down on the Warriors roster and situation. But relative to the rest of the Pacific Division, you could argue the Warriors might be in the best spot. Like, I guess the Kings, maybe. I get it. It's not football, but still, man, the Pacific Division, the Clippers, to me, what I'll say is I get they were struggling with Kawhi out and Passive P, way too many possessions where Terrence Mann had the ball in his hands, right? And I get that was part of Dallas's scheme, but I wanted to highlight something about Kyrie that I've noticed. When you play with a ball dominant and a super talented star player, a lot of the time, the role players feel added pressure because of how good they are, how dominant they have the ball, and there's a body language, there's an energy that these stars give to the role players when they pass them the ball. And the best way I can explain it is, when you're trying to fix something, right? Something's broke in your house and you've got a family member that's kind of over your shoulder. They're trying to tell you how to fix it. And eventually you give up. You're like, here, you try it, right? You fix it then. You do it. And there's a little part of you that's just like doesn't want them to succeed because you couldn't, or it's just a frustration. It's a part of your ego wants them to fail because you weren't able to do it. Now, it's not apples to apples with the comparison, but some of these star players, that's kind of the energy they give the role players when they pass them the ball or when they're not succeeding. It's like, hey man, like they don't build their confidence. There's an energy and a body language, a mentality that's the best kind of analogy I can give you. Kyrie certainly doesn't do that, at least not this version of Kyrie. And it's almost as if he understands his talent can be so intimidating to his teammates. He's got to instill when he passes it. Now, this wasn't always the case when he was younger. When he gives it up, there's much more of a congruent energy, like, here, you have it, you could do it, I trust you to do it, type of thing, rather than like the ego of like, I guess I got to do the right thing and give it to you. You got to try. And so we're seeing a different version of Kyrie Irving. And he said it himself. In order to be an all-time great, he's got to play both sides of the basketball. And it's like he's mastered the offensive end. Now he's moving on to the defensive end. Now, there are some limitations with his size. I thought a little bit of the defensive effort in that round one was the Harden thing. I think there's a little hit thing with him and Harden back and forth. But I'm curious to see, if that continues into this second round against this young Thunders team, where it's not going to be as easy. There's Jalen Williams. There's a lot more big bodies to take advantage of Kyrie offensively. But my first thought when I think of this Mavericks OKC series is, does the Cason Wallace, Derek Lively trade come back to bite OKC immediately? Year one, the rookie season for these two. And that's not to say that Cason Wallace hasn't been good for the Thunder, because he has. He's an awful small guard. I get he's a complete player. He's a nice player. But Derek Lively looks exactly like we thought he would look. He looks like young Tyson Chandler for this Dallas Mavericks team. And the combination of he and Gafford could swing the series. They could swing the series. We know, I think that's where OKC's weak. You saw the one area the Pelicans had success was the rebounding in the paint with Valanciunas. Gafford and Lively, Lively could be on this Thunder team, right? So that's an interesting little storyline, but ultimately it comes down to the stars. We know that. And how hurt is Luka? I don't know. He always looks hurt, right? He always looks like I'm going to leave that there, right? But now it's going to be interesting. There's probably going to be a lot of foul baiting between he and SGA. But it's another series that I look forward to. There's so many years and years of watching basketball and playoff basketball. Appreciate these matchups, because so often you get ones that you don't really want. You're like, I'm not too interested in that one. And I think that we're getting some good matchups here into round two. I wanted to speak a little on that Cavs Magic series in that game 7, where exactly what Orlando feared happened, right? The well ran dry with their suspect shooters. They got out to a great start. But, we all knew Orlando didn't have enough shooting, and it showed up, at the least opportune time in that game 7 in Cleveland. But boy, Paolo Banchero, man. I mean, they always do these lists of, top players under 25 years old. How many guys under 25 are you taking before Paolo? You can count them on one hand, right? Luka, Ant, Ja, maybe. I don't know, Wemby. After Luka and Ant, I don't know. This kid, like, if he had a higher release, he'd be unguardable. If he had that Rasheed Wallace, that top of the head, the Kawhi release, but he does have a lower release. But I'm ultra impressed with his first playoff performance. What he averaged, 27, 8, and 4, 45%, 40%, and 75. You imagine he's going to get far more efficient when they get a true point guard, right? Or more of a ball handling point guard. Franz, ooh-wee, bro. He looked like he did in that tournament for Michigan. That was one of the reasons during that draft I cooled on him, because his tournament performance, it didn't look great. Now, he had a great Olympics or U.S. No, he's not on U.S., but what do you call that? I don't know what the games are. For Germany, they won that title, that world title, whatever you want to call it. And he looked really good there. And I'm not ready to write him off as a prospect, but when you see a performance, it can get into a guy's head, and he's all but admitted it, and the mechanics aren't great. Look, they can go get Clay or D'Lo. I don't know about the Paul George talk, right? They can add another shooter, but I think that ultimately what they're going to discover, maybe not next year, but ultimately it's going to have to be either Suggs or Franz. You can't have both of them playing 35 minutes. They're just not good enough shooters, you know? And in all team wide, the easiest way, I think, to clarify a shooter, because some people will argue like, oh no, Wendell Carter can shoot, like Suggs can, like when a guy is open and they take the shot, do you think it's going in or not? That's the simplest way to declare a shooter, right? Shooters, when they're open, you're like, oh, it's going in, and you're surprised when it doesn't. The whole Magic roster, when they shoot an open three outside of like Joe Jingles, right? You're like, you know, I don't know, right? And so we'll see. You know, D'Lo makes more sense on paper because of the pick and roll game he can run with Paolo, and he doesn't have to have so many ball handling responsibilities. The issue I see with that is Jamal Mosley and who they've drafted in the last handful of seasons. They've done well to build up this culture. Do you want to bring D'Lo into that culture? Because we've seen time and time again, you know, we know who he is, right? As talented as he is. But maybe that's the argument. Maybe you say, hey, our culture will insulate D'Lo. We've got guys that play hard all the time and defend, and we'll surround D'Lo with those guys, and so it'll work. Maybe. The Clay thing, it may come down to money. Like, could you get Clay for less than D'Lo? Could you get D'Lo for less than Clay? I don't know. But I think that they've shown well enough in taking the Cavs to 7 for a D'Lo, for a Clay, maybe even a Paul George, to consider them. Like, Paolo is that good, right? And they showed well enough in their playoff debut. Now, this Cavs team, it was a much different situation, right? This was, did I cross up the coaches? Jamal Mosley, he coaches Orlando, right? He's got that weird meat behind the ear, pause. But, and then who's Bickerstaff is the Cavs coach, right? And, you know, the word was he was going to be out if they lost this series. Donovan Mitchell's already a foot out the door, it kind of sounds like. And early on in that game, it kind of felt like the Cavs were going to roll over. In my early notes, I was like, yo, is this kind of Donovan's fault that they're rolling over, in the sense of they all know that he has a foot out the door? Like, he passively, aggressively has let everyone know, like, yeah, I ain't trying to stay here. And so that kind of killed their spirits. But then he had a get on my back performance. And they've got to feel good that Strus and LeVert showed up just in the nick of time, because you know Jared Allen wasn't, right? You know Jared Allen wasn't, but they came just in the nick of time and gave him that punch off the bench. And I think the unsung hero for the Cavs, at least yesterday, was Isaac Okoro, a guy that, you know, the bust label you could throw around, and his defensive performance on Banchero in that second half, and the ability to guard a guy that big, and he can get out and guard, you know, the 1 through 5. When you say a guy can guard 1 through 5, that's kind of, it's not literal. It's really more like 1 through 4, right? But Okoro was impressive. We know he lacks shooting. I think for Isaac, the blueprint is like a budget Andre Iguodala. And now he's not quite as long, as big as Andre, and he's not nearly as good offensively. Like, Andre could run point for you if he wanted to. He can set up the offense and do that. I don't think Isaac can do all that, but I think that's the blueprint. Like, hard nose, you know, little of this, little of that, fill in the blanks, and he stepped up. Without him, I don't think they slow down Paolo, and they're probably, you know, in dismay right now. Now, headed to Boston. You know, are they going to be the biggest underdogs of the second round? I would imagine. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? They're going to be the biggest underdogs. I think the only way they stand a chance is if Evan Mobley has some sort of breakout series. offensively. We know how good he is defensively. He shows these flashes of aggression. But it's just, I think he no longer has that 11-foot ceiling, right? What do you consider a high ceiling? 10 foot and above is high ceilings in a house, right? That means you can be a franchise player. I don't know if he has a 10 or 11-foot ceiling because he's just not aggressive enough offensively, right? You heard them talking about it during the telecast. Now, to be fair to him, Garland and Mitchell, neither of them really want to pass the ball. They really are looking for theirs. They'll do it, but they're really looking for theirs when they turn the corner most of the time. But yeah, I don't know how competitive that Boston. I'd take Boston in 5, right? I mean, Garland and Mitchell, as fun as they can be to watch, to me, they are Dame and CJ East. They'll get into the playoffs and then they'll get clapped. But, there's no shame in that. It is what it is. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to this Denver-Minnesota series. I think we're in for perhaps a classic here and something that's going to mean more than maybe just these playoffs. When we look historically at the greatness of some of these players. I'm also very interested in this Dallas OKC series. So I'll be covering both of those series back and forth, not every game, on my Patreon. And we'll take a glimpse off into the East here as well. But, I got to keep my West Coast bias. And also check for some live streams here. I'm going to try to hop on live and do some more current takes, perhaps after some of these games or pre-game. As always, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.